Welcome back to History for Hours. Tonight, we slip into the quieter side of New York streets, where deals were made without raised voices and power didn't need an audience. This is the world of Paul DiCocco Sr., a man guided by calculation, not impulse, where influence moved through whispered conversations and patience often mattered more than force. Most people couldn't survive a life like this, not because of chaos, but because it demanded constant awareness, loyalty tested in silence, and trust that could shift without warning. Before we settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Only if you genuinely enjoy these long, slow journeys through history's darker corners. And if you're listening right now, drop a comment with your location and local time. I love knowing where these stories travel. Now dim the lights, let the city grow quiet, and settle in as we ease into the measured, watchful story of Paul DiCocco Sr. Paul DiCocco Sr. was born into a world of bustling streets, tight-knit neighborhoods, and family values that ran as deep as the roots of the city itself. From a young age, he had a keen sense of observation. He noticed the little things, how people moved, how they spoke, how respect could be earned quietly or lost quickly. He was a boy who learned early that every action had consequences, and every choice shaped the path ahead. There was a curiosity in him that went beyond mere play or mischief. He wanted to understand people, to understand society, and to grasp the unspoken rules that governed the world around him. As a teenager, Paul discovered that life was a mix of opportunity and caution. The streets he walked were alive with stories, lessons, and subtle power plays. It wasn't about who shouted the loudest or appeared the toughest. It was about who could observe, adapt, and act at the right moment. Paul watched, listened, and learned. He wasn't drawn to trouble for the sake of rebellion. Instead, he was drawn to understanding how the world worked and where influence could be found. Even then, he carried a quiet confidence, a sense that he could navigate complexity with patience and insight. His family played a pivotal role in shaping the man he would become. They emphasized loyalty, trust, and respect, values that Paul internalized deeply. Conversations around the dinner table often touched on ambition, fairness, and the importance of keeping one's word. These lessons weren't abstract. They were grounded in everyday interactions, the way neighbors treated one another, and the subtle ways reputation could be built or destroyed. Paul learned that respect was earned through consistent action, integrity, and awareness of others, not through force or loud declarations. School offered another arena for observation. Paul noticed how students organized themselves, how leaders emerged, and how alliances shifted quietly beneath the surface. He was naturally perceptive, often reading situations before others had even realized the dynamics at play. His ability to gauge intentions, interpret behavior, and anticipate outcomes made him a natural strategist, even in casual games or classroom interactions. He learned that careful listening and timing often mattered more than speaking first or acting impulsively. By the time Paul entered young adulthood, he had developed a clear sense of direction. He wanted to build a life that balanced ambition with principle, influence with discretion. His early experiences had taught him that opportunities often came quietly, in subtle forms, and that the key to success lay in recognizing them and acting thoughtfully. He wasn't chasing fame or recognition. He was quietly preparing himself to navigate the complex networks of relationships, trust, and influence that defined the adult world around him. The neighborhood itself was a school of life. Paul watched local business dealings, interactions between families, and the unspoken agreements that maintained order. He understood that influence could be subtle, expressed through reliability, negotiation, and mutual respect rather than intimidation or coercion. The ability to maintain composure, assess situations, and guide outcomes with subtlety became a defining skill. He realized that life's most important victories often occurred without spectacle, achieved through patience, insight, and careful planning. Paul's charisma was understated but compelling. People were drawn to his quiet confidence, his ability to listen, and the steady assurance he projected. He didn't need to dominate conversations or assert authority to be influential. His presence alone suggested reliability and insight. Those who interacted with him often felt heard, understood, and subtly guided. This natural ability to inspire trust and respect without overt displays became a cornerstone of his approach to life. As he matured, Paul also discovered the importance of adaptability. Life rarely followed predictable patterns, and success depended on recognizing change and responding thoughtfully. He learned to adjust to new social dynamics, shifting alliances, and unexpected opportunities. This flexibility, combined with his keen observation, allowed him to navigate complexity effectively and maintain influence in a constantly evolving environment. One of Paul's early lessons in leadership came from mentoring younger peers. He discovered that guidance could be provided subtly, by example, and through careful advice rather than direct instruction. By helping others navigate challenges while maintaining their dignity, he cultivated respect and loyalty. This principle of quiet, supportive leadership became central to his character, influencing how he approached relationships and opportunities throughout his life. In the world around him, Paul noticed patterns in behavior and social interaction that others overlooked. He understood that success often hinged on anticipating reactions, identifying motives, and shaping outcomes without drawing attention to oneself. This strategic observation allowed him to operate with confidence, influence decisions, and maintain stability within his network of relationships. Over time, his skill at reading situations became instinctual, guiding his choices with precision and insight. Even as he built his life, Paul never lost sight of values like loyalty, integrity, and responsibility. He recognized that true influence was not about coercion but about creating trust, demonstrating consistency, and maintaining credibility. By acting in alignment with these principles, he ensured that his relationships and reputation remained strong, giving him the foundation to navigate the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. Paul also understood the importance of patience. Opportunities often arrived slowly and subtly, and the ability to wait for the right moment proved more powerful than impulsive action. By exercising restraint, he could maximize the effectiveness of his decisions and maintain flexibility to respond strategically when circumstances required. This balance between observation and action became a defining feature of his approach to life. By the end of this early chapter, Paul DiCocco Sr. had begun to emerge as a figure of quiet influence and thoughtful leadership. His life was built not on spectacle or bravado, but on careful observation, strategic patience, and consistent integrity. Every interaction, every decision, and every lesson learned contributed to the foundation of a life that would navigate complexity with subtlety, insight, and enduring respect. As Paul DiCocco Sr. transitioned into adulthood, the world around him seemed to stretch with both possibility and challenge. The lessons of his youth, the importance of observation, patience, and respect, remained deeply ingrained, but now they were tested on a larger, more complex stage. The neighborhoods that had once been playgrounds became networks of relationships, opportunities, and responsibilities. Paul quickly realized that navigating this world successfully required more than intelligence or ambition. It demanded strategy, empathy, and the ability to anticipate the unseen movements of others. Early in his adult years, Paul began to take a more active role in the local community. He noticed that influence was rarely a matter of domination. Rather, it was cultivated through reliability, consistency, and subtle guidance. When neighbors or peers needed help, advice, or support, Paul was the one who could be trusted to provide it thoughtfully, without seeking recognition. This quiet reliability began to establish him as someone whose opinion carried weight, someone whose presence commanded respect without a single word of assertion. He found work in areas that allowed him to interact with a wide range of people, each providing unique lessons. From small businesses to social clubs, every environment became a classroom. He observed negotiations, measured responses to conflict, and studied how leaders naturally emerged from a crowd. One of Paul's early realizations was that people respond to fairness and consistency more than to loud proclamations or threats. By modeling these behaviors, he gained subtle authority, fostering connections that would serve him for years to come. Relationships became a central part of his life. Paul valued loyalty, trust, and integrity, understanding that these were the currency of any meaningful influence. He cultivated friendships with care, always observing the interplay between words, actions, and motivations. Some people were aligned with his values and vision, while others revealed their true nature over time. Paul's ability to discern character was exceptional, allowing him to maintain a network of reliable allies and supportive acquaintances, while minimizing unnecessary conflict or exposure to risk. Family remained a grounding force. Paul recognized that strength without a moral compass could easily lead to ruin. His family taught him that responsibility and honor mattered as much as strategy and cleverness. Paul carried these lessons forward into his adult relationships and professional dealings. He learned that influence was not merely about control or success. It was about creating environments where mutual respect, trust, and understanding flourished. By his mid-20s, Paul had begun to step into more formal leadership roles, though in ways that emphasized subtle guidance rather than overt dominance. He noticed that true influence often involved steering situations indirectly, providing insight, and allowing others to feel ownership of decisions. This approach was far more effective than direct instruction or pressure, and it reinforced loyalty and respect. Those around him began to view him not only as competent but also as wise, a person capable of navigating complexity with clarity and foresight. Business dealings provided additional lessons. Paul learned the nuances of negotiation, timing, and strategic patience. Opportunities often presented themselves in unexpected forms, and his ability to recognize potential where others saw risk became a defining skill. He understood that rushing into decisions could undermine even the most promising situations, while careful planning and timing amplified success. His calm, measured approach earned the confidence of partners, colleagues, and community members alike. Social intelligence became one of Paul's greatest strengths. He observed how individuals responded to success, pressure, and interpersonal dynamics. He learned to adapt his approach to the needs, motivations, and temperaments of those around him, balancing assertiveness with patience, advice with listening, and initiative with observation. Over time, his reputation as a perceptive, reliable, and thoughtful individual spread quietly, establishing a network of people who trusted his judgment and guidance. Paul's personal discipline remained central to his development. He adhered to routines that reinforced mental clarity, focus, and strategic thinking. Even moments of leisure were purposeful, allowing for reflection, study, and observation. By maintaining this disciplined lifestyle, he ensured that his decisions were guided by clarity and insight rather than impulse or distraction. This internal structure became a foundation for both personal growth and the cultivation of influence in broader social and professional circles. As he matured, Paul increasingly realized that patience was not passive. It was active and strategic. Observing, waiting, and gathering information were essential tools in his repertoire. Opportunities and challenges rarely emerged clearly at first glance. Their true nature was often revealed slowly, requiring discernment and timing. Paul became a master of balancing observation with action, knowing when to step forward and when to remain silent, when to act and when to let circumstances unfold naturally. Mentorship also played a role in his development. Paul began guiding younger individuals, teaching through example, subtle advice, and demonstration. He recognized that leadership was not about control, but about empowering others to achieve while maintaining alignment with shared values. This form of influence, rooted in respect and guidance rather than command, solidified his reputation and expanded the network of individuals who looked to him for insight and direction. Throughout these years, Paul's life was also characterized by reflection. He continually evaluated the long-term consequences of his decisions, understanding that immediate gains were often less significant than sustained impact. This forward-thinking approach allowed him to navigate challenges with foresight, anticipate changes in his environment, and maintain stability in his personal and professional networks. His influence became enduring because it was built on thoughtful, consistent action rather than opportunistic or impulsive moves. Despite growing responsibilities and influence, Paul never lost sight of his core values. He understood that true respect and authority come from integrity, fairness, and loyalty. People may admire ambition or skill, but they remain connected to those who consistently demonstrate reliability and honor. Paul's life became a testament to this principle. showing that influence and success are most meaningful when rooted in values that endure beyond immediate circumstances. By the end of this phase of his life, Paul DiCocco Sr. had established himself as a figure of quiet authority and thoughtful guidance. He was respected not for aggression or spectacle, but for his insight, patience, and ability to navigate complexity with wisdom. His network of relationships was strong, his reputation solid, and his ability to influence events subtly yet effectively had become a defining feature of his character. Every action, every decision, every interaction contributed to a life built on strategy, integrity, and the enduring power of careful observation and guidance. As Paul DiCocco Sr. entered the peak of his adulthood, his world became a complex tapestry of relationships, responsibilities, and opportunities. By now, he had mastered the art of observation, patience, and subtle influence, but the challenges he faced were larger and more intricate than those of his youth. The neighborhoods and streets that had once seemed simple now held layers of human interaction, social dynamics, and opportunities that required careful navigation. Every person he met, every situation he encountered, became an opportunity to test his insight, refine his judgment, and exercise his ability to influence outcomes thoughtfully. Paul's reputation had grown, not through flashy displays or overt dominance, but through consistent reliability and quiet competence. People came to him for advice, support, and guidance, often without realizing the depth of insight he brought to every interaction. His skill lay in providing help in ways that empowered others, allowing them to feel confident in their decisions while subtly steering outcomes in directions that maintained balance and stability. He had become a master of what could be described as invisible leadership, where influence was exerted without coercion and respect was earned through integrity and insight. In these years, Paul began to expand his network more deliberately. He understood that influence was cumulative, built over time through trust, reliability, and subtle guidance. Every connection he made was evaluated for alignment with his values, integrity, and the potential for mutual support. Some relationships were nurtured over decades, growing stronger with each interaction. Others were allowed to fade naturally, either because trust had eroded or because the connection no longer aligned with his long-term vision. This careful management of relationships was as much a part of his strategy as any decision he made in daily life. Professional interactions became arenas for demonstrating strategic thinking and insight. Paul noticed that real influence was rarely about dominating conversations or forcing decisions. It was about listening carefully, understanding underlying motivations, and guiding choices in ways that felt natural to others. In meetings, discussions, or negotiations, he often remained quiet at first, observing the dynamics, noting shifts in tone, and understanding each participant's priorities. By the time he spoke, his words were precise, impactful, and respected, not because they were commanding, but because they were insightful and timely. Mentorship continued to be a cornerstone of his life. Paul guided younger individuals through example and subtle advice, teaching lessons about patience, observation, and strategic thinking. Unlike a traditional teacher or leader, he did not impose directives. Instead, he created environments where men could learn through experience, while he provided gentle guidance and perspective. This approach earned him lasting loyalty and respect, as people felt empowered rather than constrained, a reflection of his broader philosophy that true influence is rooted in subtle guidance rather than overt control. Family remained an anchor amidst the complexities of his growing influence. Paul understood that while strategy, observation, and networking were important, a grounded perspective came from strong personal relationships. Family provided clarity, emotional support, and accountability, reminding him of the values that had shaped him from childhood: loyalty, integrity, and responsibility. By nurturing these connections, Paul ensured that his influence remained balanced, informed by principle rather than ambition alone. Paul's daily life had become a carefully orchestrated routine. Time for reflection, observation, and strategic planning was as important as professional engagements or social interactions. He used these periods to analyze past decisions, anticipate future developments, and refine his approach to relationships and opportunities. This disciplined structure reinforced his ability to navigate complex social landscapes with calm assurance, ensuring that every action he took was deliberate and aligned with his long-term objectives. Observation remained one of Paul's most powerful tools. He could detect subtle shifts in behavior, tone, or expression that revealed unspoken intentions or hidden opportunities. These insights allowed him to anticipate challenges, guide interactions, and influence outcomes without confrontation or overt direction. In many ways, his ability to read people became instinctual, honed over years of careful attention and practice. This skill enabled him to operate several steps ahead, maintaining stability and achieving results with minimal friction. Timing continued to be a critical element of his strategy. Paul understood that the right action at the wrong time could undermine even the best laid plans. He exercised patience, waiting for circumstances to align, and choosing moments when his influence could have the maximum effect. This strategic use of timing enhanced his reputation as thoughtful, deliberate, and effective, a person whose decisions were respected because they consistently produced positive and balanced outcomes. As his influence grew, Paul began to see patterns not only in individual behavior but also in broader social dynamics. He observed how neighborhoods evolved, how community interactions shifted, and how collective behavior could be anticipated. By integrating these larger patterns into his decision-making, he positioned himself advantageously, able to navigate both personal and communal challenges with foresight and subtle authority. His understanding of these dynamics allowed him to act in ways that felt natural to others while achieving strategic objectives behind the scenes. Paul also cultivated resilience. Life, he knew, was unpredictable, and challenges often arose without warning. He had learned to remain composed, analyze situations quickly, and respond strategically rather than react impulsively. This composure reinforced his reputation as a figure of reliability and wisdom. People trusted that he could manage complexity calmly, that he could guide them through uncertainty without unnecessary tension, and that his decisions would be measured and thoughtful. Leadership, for Paul, was always a balance between guidance and autonomy. He sought to empower those around him, providing insight and perspective without imposing control. This approach created loyalty and fostered collaboration. People felt respected, their autonomy preserved, and their confidence strengthened. In this way, Paul's influence was both subtle and profound, creating an environment where stability and cooperation flourished naturally. As years passed, Paul became increasingly recognized for his strategic foresight. He could anticipate challenges before they arose, identify opportunities that others overlooked, and maintain cohesion in his network of relationships. His skill in balancing observation, patience, and decisive action ensured that outcomes aligned with both immediate and long-term objectives. His ability to remain adaptable while staying true to core values became a hallmark of his influence and leadership. Despite his growing prominence, Paul remained grounded in principle. Integrity, loyalty, and responsibility guided every decision, interaction, and strategic choice. He understood that reputation, once compromised, could never be fully restored. By maintaining a consistent ethical framework, he ensured that his influence was respected and enduring, rather than transient or contingent on circumstance alone. By the end of this phase of his life, Paul DiCocco Sr. had emerged as a figure whose influence was both quiet and powerful. He had mastered the art of observation, cultivated a network of trust and loyalty, and demonstrated the ability to navigate complexity with patience, insight, and subtle authority. His story was no longer just about personal growth. It had become a testament to the power of thoughtful leadership, strategic patience, and the enduring impact of guiding others with wisdom and respect. As Paul DiCocco Sr. entered the prime of his adult life, the lessons of his youth and early adulthood began to converge into a period of remarkable clarity and strategic mastery. By this point, he had learned to navigate the complexities of human behavior, social networks, and professional landscapes with precision. Every interaction, every choice, and every relationship was a thread in a larger tapestry that he carefully wove, ensuring that his influence remained subtle yet powerful. The foundations of his success were not built on overt displays of authority or intimidation, but on the quiet, deliberate cultivation of trust, respect, and foresight. Paul's daily routines became highly refined, blending observation, reflection, and purposeful action. He started each day with a period of contemplation, reviewing ongoing situations, analyzing patterns, and planning strategic responses. This morning ritual was not merely about preparation. It was a deliberate exercise in understanding the dynamics at play around him. He considered not just immediate outcomes but also long-term consequences, always weighing potential actions against their broader implications. Through this discipline, he cultivated a mental clarity that allowed him to respond to challenges with calm assurance and insight. By now, Paul's network of relationships was extensive, comprising individuals from a wide array of social, professional, and community contexts. He recognized that influence was not simply about numbers or titles, but about the depth and quality of connections. Some relationships were carefully nurtured over decades, strengthened by mutual trust, shared experiences, and consistent demonstration of reliability. Others were allowed to evolve naturally, understanding that not all connections were meant to endure. Paul's ability to discern which relationships to invest in and which to release became one of his most effective tools for sustaining long-term influence. In professional and social spheres, Paul's reputation for fairness, insight, and discretion preceded him. People sought his counsel not because he demanded it, but because they trusted his judgment and valued his perspective. He had mastered the art of subtle guidance, providing advice and direction in ways that empowered others rather than constraining them. This approach created loyalty and respect that endured, allowing Paul to shape outcomes indirectly while maintaining harmony and trust within his circles. His influence was often invisible to those outside his inner network, yet its effects were felt widely. Mentorship continued to play a significant role in Paul's life. He recognized that true leadership was not about imposing authority but about fostering growth and enabling others to succeed. Through subtle guidance, encouragement, and the sharing of lessons learned from his own experiences, Paul cultivated a cadre of individuals who respected his insight and sought his counsel. His mentorship was both practical and philosophical, teaching not only skills and strategies, but also principles of patience, observation, and ethical behavior. Those who learned from him often carried his influence forward, extending its reach across generations and contexts. Paul also became increasingly adept at reading the subtleties of human behavior. Micro-expressions, shifts in tone, body language, and timing all became signals he could interpret to anticipate intentions and responses. This skill allowed him to navigate complex negotiations, interpersonal challenges, and community dynamics with finesse. Rather than relying on force or coercion, Paul employed understanding, timing, and subtle suggestion to guide situations toward mutually beneficial outcomes. His perceptiveness allowed him to remain several steps ahead, minimizing risk while maximizing opportunity. During this period, Paul's approach to problem-solving evolved into a balance of strategic patience and decisive action. He understood that rushing decisions could undermine long-term goals, while excessive hesitation could result in missed opportunities. By carefully assessing situations, observing outcomes, and calculating the best moment to act, Paul ensured that his interventions were both timely and effective. This ability to harmonize observation with action became a hallmark of his leadership and influence. Family continued to provide grounding and perspective. While Paul's network and responsibilities expanded, his relationships with family members offered stability and emotional clarity. Conversations with relatives, shared meals, and moments of reflection reinforced the values that had guided him since youth. Loyalty, integrity, empathy, and responsibility. These familial connections reminded him that true influence was most sustainable when rooted in principles that respected both personal and communal well-being. Paul's social intelligence reached a level of refinement that allowed him to anticipate group dynamics and navigate complex interactions effortlessly. He could predict how different personalities would interact, identify potential conflicts before they arose, and guide outcomes in ways that preserved relationships and promoted cooperation. His presence often brought a sense of calm and confidence to discussions, allowing others to feel secure in their decisions while subtly steering the collective toward constructive resolutions. economic and professional opportunities also required strategic insight. Paul had learned that influence extended beyond personal interactions to include the management of resources, partnerships, and ventures. He carefully evaluated risk and reward, timing and positioning, always considering both immediate benefits and long-term sustainability. By aligning his actions with ethical principles and strategic foresight, Paul ensured that his influence translated into tangible, enduring outcomes that strengthened his network and reputation. Patience remained a central tenet of Paul's approach. He understood that many of life's most significant opportunities and solutions revealed themselves slowly. By exercising restraint and allowing situations to unfold naturally, he positioned himself to act decisively when circumstances were optimal. This combination of patience, foresight, and strategic timing allowed Paul to navigate challenges that might have overwhelmed less disciplined individuals. It also reinforced his reputation as someone who could manage complexity with wisdom and calm authority. As his influence matured, Paul increasingly became a source of stability within his community. People looked to him not only for guidance but also for the assurance that challenges could be met thoughtfully and responsibly. His ability to balance insight, discretion, and action created a sense of security and trust that extended across personal, professional, and social networks. Paul's leadership was marked by subtlety rather than spectacle, by consistency rather than flamboyance, and by integrity rather than self-interest. Throughout this period, Paul also honed his understanding of timing and opportunity. He recognized that influence was most effective when aligned with the natural flow of events rather than imposed externally. By observing patterns, anticipating shifts, and choosing moments carefully, he was able to guide outcomes without overt control. This strategic approach reinforced his reputation as a perceptive, reliable, and highly effective figure within his circles. Paul's personal discipline extended into reflection and continuous learning. He regularly reviewed past decisions, evaluated successes and missteps, and sought to deepen his understanding of both human behavior and societal dynamics. This commitment to self-improvement allowed him to maintain clarity, adaptability, and effectiveness, ensuring that his influence remained relevant and enduring over time. He approached life as a continuous journey of observation, insight, and strategic refinement. By the end of this period, Paul DiCocco Sr. had emerged as a figure of mature leadership, whose influence extended across multiple spheres of life. He had mastered the art of subtle guidance, cultivated a network of trust and loyalty, and demonstrated the ability to navigate complex social and professional landscapes with patience, insight, and discretion. His story at this stage was one of quiet authority, thoughtful mentorship, and the enduring impact of strategic foresight, observation, and ethical engagement. Paul's life exemplified the principle that true influence is rooted in understanding, consistency, and respect. By blending patience with decisive action, observation with subtle guidance, and personal integrity with strategic thinking, he created a life of meaningful impact. His legacy was not defined by spectacle or outward dominance, but by the invisible yet powerful ways in which he shaped his world, guided others, and maintained harmony within complex networks of human relationships. As Paul DiCocco Sr. entered the later stages of his career, his influence and reputation had reached a level few could rival. By now, his life was defined not only by the relationships he had carefully nurtured, but also by the wisdom he had accrued through decades of observation, strategy, and quiet leadership. Every decision, every action, and every interaction had been guided by the principles that shaped him since youth. Patience, insight, integrity, and the ability to see several steps ahead in every situation. He had become a central figure in his community, respected by peers and admired by those who had observed the consistency and subtlety of his approach. Paul's presence in any room carried a sense of calm authority. He did not command attention through loud declarations or flamboyant gestures. Rather, he projected a quiet confidence that drew people naturally toward him. Conversations with Paul were measured and thoughtful. People sought his advice not out of obligation, but because they recognized the depth of his understanding and the fairness with which he assessed situations. His ability to guide discussions and influence outcomes without overt control was a hallmark of his leadership style, one that left a lasting impression on all who interacted with him. During this period, mentorship became even more central to his life. Paul understood that the impact of his experience would be most enduring if passed along to those who were ready to carry forward the principles of thoughtful leadership and strategic insight. He invested time in younger associates, offering guidance not through commands but through example, subtle advice, and shared experiences. Paul emphasized the importance of integrity, patience, and careful observation, teaching others that true influence comes from earning trust and respect, not from asserting dominance. The loyalty and admiration of those he mentored became a living testament to his approach, extending his influence far beyond what he could achieve alone. Family continued to serve as the anchor for his life. Paul had always understood that personal connections were a source of grounding and clarity, especially amidst the complexities of his professional and social interactions. The bonds he maintained with relatives reinforced his values and reminded him of the importance of empathy, responsibility, and fairness. Family gatherings, shared meals, and quiet conversations offered a space for reflection and connection, ensuring that the principles guiding his influence remained rooted in genuine human relationships rather than mere strategy or ambition. By this stage, Paul's strategic abilities had become nearly instinctual. He could anticipate outcomes with remarkable precision, understand the subtle motivations of those around him, and adapt his approach to suit the context of each interaction. This skill extended beyond personal relationships into community dynamics, professional engagements, and even larger societal patterns. Paul recognized that influence was most effective when it aligned with the natural flow of events rather than imposing itself externally. By harmonizing his actions with the rhythm of the world around him, he was able to guide outcomes subtly yet decisively. Professional dealings during these years required both wisdom and foresight. Paul had learned that every opportunity carried layers of potential risk and reward, and that the most successful outcomes often came from a careful balance of timing, negotiation, and ethical judgment. He approached each endeavor with thorough preparation, considering both immediate consequences and long-term implications. This meticulous approach ensured that his decisions were consistently sound, earning the trust and respect of colleagues and partners alike. Paul also understood the importance of resilience. Life, he knew, was unpredictable, and challenges could arise without warning. Yet he approached every difficulty with calm composure, relying on his analytical skills, experience, and intuition to navigate obstacles effectively. His ability to maintain steadiness under pressure reinforced his credibility and enhanced the confidence others placed in him. People knew that with Paul, decisions were thoughtful, challenges were met with clarity, and outcomes were guided by careful reasoning rather than reactionary impulse. In addition to strategic skill, Paul's empathy became a defining aspect of his leadership. He had long observed that influence was most sustainable when it respected the perspectives, needs, and dignity of others. By combining strategic insight with genuine concern for people's well-being, Paul cultivated relationships that were strong, durable, and mutually reinforcing. His mentorship, guidance, and counsel were always delivered with a sense of care, ensuring that influence was exercised responsibly and ethically. During this period, Paul also became increasingly aware of his legacy. He understood that the impact of his life would not be measured solely by achievements or recognition, but by the influence he had on others and the principles he had instilled. This awareness guided his decisions, reinforcing the importance of integrity, patience, and thoughtful action. Paul sought to leave a mark not through spectacle, but through the enduring respect, loyalty, and ethical guidance he had provided throughout his life. Observation remained central to his approach. Paul's ability to read situations, detect subtle shifts in behavior, and anticipate outcomes had been honed over decades. He used this skill not to manipulate or dominate, but to guide interactions toward constructive and balanced results. Whether in professional negotiations, social gatherings, or community projects, his insight allowed him to maintain stability, foster cooperation, and achieve desired outcomes with minimal conflict. His perceptiveness became a defining characteristic, setting him apart as a leader whose influence was quiet yet profound. Patience, as always, was a cornerstone of Paul's methodology. He knew that the most meaningful opportunities and solutions often unfolded gradually, requiring careful attention and timing. By exercising restraint and waiting for the right moment to act, he maximized the effectiveness of his interventions and reinforced the trust others placed in him. This deliberate approach ensured that his influence was not fleeting or opportunistic, but enduring and deeply rooted. Paul's understanding of human dynamics had reached a level of sophistication that allowed him to guide groups, organizations, and communities with subtle effectiveness. He could anticipate challenges, identify potential allies, and mitigate risks before they became problems. This ability to operate strategically within complex networks made him a stabilizing force, one whose counsel and presence were sought after across multiple spheres of influence. As his life progressed, Paul also devoted time to reflection and continuous learning. He reviewed past decisions, analyzed successes and missteps, and sought to deepen his understanding of people and systems. This ongoing process of self-improvement ensured that his insight remained sharp, his judgment sound, and his leadership relevant in an ever-changing world. By committing to lifelong learning, he reinforced the durability of his influence and the consistency of his approach. Through these years, Paul DiCocco Sr. demonstrated that true leadership and influence are not about visibility or recognition, but about the careful, thoughtful application of insight, patience, and ethical judgment. His life was a testament to the power of subtle guidance, the value of trust and loyalty, and the enduring impact of principled action. Every interaction, decision, and relationship contributed to a legacy defined by respect, wisdom, and the quiet shaping of outcomes. By the conclusion of this phase, Paul had become a figure whose influence was both profound and lasting. His life illustrated the principle that true power lies not in force or spectacle, but in understanding, guiding, and supporting others in ways that endure beyond immediate circumstances. He had built a network of trust, respect, and loyalty, and through his mentorship and guidance, he ensured that his impact would resonate well into the future. Paul's story at this stage of life exemplified the culmination of decades of observation, discipline, and ethical engagement. He had mastered the balance between patience and action, strategy and empathy, guidance and empowerment. His legacy was defined by the respect he commanded, the wisdom he imparted, and the subtle but enduring influence he exerted over his world, leaving a model of leadership that others could follow with integrity and purpose. As Paul DiCocco Sr. moved into the later stages of his life, his perspective on influence, leadership, and legacy became increasingly refined. Decades of careful observation, strategic action, and thoughtful guidance had placed him in a position of subtle authority, respected across multiple spheres. But with this level of experience came a deeper awareness. The most meaningful contributions were not always measured in immediate results or visible success, but in the enduring impact of his actions on the people and communities around him. Paul began to reflect on his life not only as a series of decisions and achievements, but as a network of relationships and lessons that could extend far beyond his own presence. At this stage, Paul's daily routines were shaped as much by reflection as by active engagement. He would spend long mornings reviewing situations, analyzing past interactions, and thinking about future challenges in the community and among his associates. These periods of contemplation were never idle. They were exercises in strategic foresight, designed to anticipate outcomes, align interests, and guide actions with precision. By combining reflection with experience, Paul was able to maintain clarity of judgment and adapt to the changing dynamics of those around him. Family remained central to his world. Paul had always understood that true influence is grounded in personal integrity and strong relationships. Over the years, he had maintained close ties with family members, ensuring that his personal life was a source of stability and guidance. Family gatherings became more than just social events. They were opportunities for mentoring, sharing wisdom, and reinforcing the values that had guided him throughout his life. Loyalty, integrity, patience, and responsibility. These gatherings were also moments of joy and connection, reminding Paul of the human element behind all leadership and influence. Mentorship, now a defining feature of Paul's later years, expanded in scope and depth. Having guided younger associates and friends for decades, he now focused on imparting lessons that would endure. Paul taught the importance of strategic thinking, patience, and subtle guidance, emphasizing that true leadership is rarely about domination or recognition. Instead, it is about empowering others, fostering trust, and creating environments where collaboration and mutual respect can flourish. The individuals who benefited from his mentorship often became leaders in their own right, carrying forward his principles and extending his influence into new contexts. Paul's ability to read human behavior had become nearly instinctive. Subtle cues in tone, posture, or expression allowed him to anticipate intentions, manage conflicts, and guide discussions toward positive outcomes. This skill, honed over decades, was complemented by his understanding of timing. He knew when to act, when to remain silent, and when to allow situations to unfold naturally. By combining observation with patience, Paul ensured that his interventions were effective and sustainable, reinforcing his reputation as a thoughtful and reliable figure. During this period, Paul also began to contemplate the broader implications of his work. Beyond his immediate network, he saw opportunities to contribute to community stability and cohesion. Through mentorship, guidance, and support, he sought to shape environments where fairness, respect, and cooperation could thrive. This approach reflected his belief that influence carries responsibility, that true power is measured not by personal gain, but by the positive effects it has on others. Paul's social intelligence remained a cornerstone of his effectiveness. He understood group dynamics, anticipated challenges, and identified potential allies and obstacles before they emerged. This ability allowed him to manage both relationships and projects with subtlety and precision. His calm, thoughtful presence reassured those around him, fostering trust and confidence in his judgment. People came to rely on his insight not out of fear or obligation, but because of the reliability and integrity he consistently demonstrated. As his life progressed, Paul also embraced the role of historian and storyteller within his circles. He shared lessons learned from his experiences, weaving narratives that highlighted strategic thinking, ethical decision-making, and the importance of human connection. These stories were never boastful or self-serving. They were teaching tools designed to instill wisdom and perspective in those who would follow in his footsteps. In this way, Paul ensured that his experiences were not lost but became part of a collective knowledge that could guide future generations. Reflection on legacy became increasingly important. Paul recognized that the impact of his life would ultimately be measured not only by the relationships he nurtured, but by the culture of integrity, respect, and thoughtful action he helped instill. He took care to align every decision with the values he held dear, understanding that consistency and principle were the foundations of lasting influence. This foresight allowed him to approach even complex challenges with confidence, knowing that his actions contributed to a broader vision of stability and positive impact. Health and personal well-being also became priorities. Paul understood that sustaining influence requires not only mental acuity and strategic thinking, but also physical and emotional resilience. He maintained routines that supported his energy, focus, and clarity, ensuring that he could continue to engage effectively with his network and community. By caring for himself, he modeled the importance of balance, discipline, and self-respect for those around him. Through these years, Paul's philosophy of leadership, rooted in observation, patience, subtle guidance, and ethical action, became fully realized. His influence was no longer simply about managing relationships or navigating opportunities. It was about shaping a culture of trust, respect, and strategic thought that could endure independently of his direct involvement. Those who had learned from him, observed him, or collaborated with him carried forward his principles, ensuring that his impact would resonate long after he stepped back from active engagement. Paul's later years were characterized by a balance of action, reflection, and teaching. He continued to participate in community projects, offer guidance to associates, and support family and friends, but always with a measured, thoughtful approach. Every action was intentional, every interaction purposeful. He had mastered the delicate art of influencing without controlling, guiding without imposing, and leading without demanding, leaving a legacy of subtle but profound impact. By the conclusion of this phase, Paul DiCocco Sr. had become a figure whose life exemplified the principles of thoughtful leadership, enduring influence, and ethical engagement. His story was one of growth, observation, and strategic insight, showing that true power and respect are earned through consistency, patience, and integrity. Through mentorship, guidance, and careful cultivation of relationships, he ensured that the values he embodied would be carried forward, creating a lasting legacy that extended well beyond his own life. Paul's life demonstrated that influence is most powerful when exercised with wisdom, empathy, and foresight. His subtle authority, grounded in principle and reinforced by experience, allowed him to shape outcomes, guide others, and foster environments where trust, respect, and collaboration thrived. In his later years, he reflected on a life well lived, aware that the true measure of his impact lay not in accolades or recognition, but in the enduring relationships, lessons, and positive change he had cultivated throughout his lifetime. As Paul DiCocco Sr. entered the final chapters of his life, he carried with him the cumulative wisdom of decades spent observing, guiding, and shaping the world around him. His earlier years of learning, experimentation, and strategic decision-making had matured into a profound understanding of human nature, relationships, and the subtle forces that govern social dynamics. Every action he took now was measured, deliberate, and informed by the lessons of a life lived thoughtfully and intentionally. The quiet authority Paul wielded was rooted in consistency, reliability, and empathy. He had long understood that influence is most enduring when it is exercised without coercion, when guidance feels natural rather than imposed, and when trust is built over time through predictable, principled behavior. People who interacted with him often felt reassured and inspired by his presence, sensing that he navigated complexity with calm insight and that his advice was both considered and grounded in experience. In these years, he became a touchstone for those seeking guidance in both personal and professional matters. Mentorship remained central to Paul's mission. He had spent decades shaping the perspectives and capabilities of younger associates, but now his focus was on ensuring that the principles he embodied would be carried forward long after he stepped back from active involvement. He shared stories that illustrated not only strategic thinking and practical skill, but also ethical judgment, patience, and the value of long-term perspective. These narratives were designed to teach lessons subtly, leaving room for interpretation and personal growth while embedding the wisdom of his experience. Family life continued to anchor Paul, providing both emotional sustenance and a lens through which he could measure the impact of his actions. The bonds he nurtured over decades were deeper than ever, strengthened by shared experiences, mutual respect, and the care he had consistently invested in those relationships. Conversations with family members often turned to reflection and guidance, with Paul offering perspective on challenges, decisions, and the complexities of life. These exchanges were not just familial. They were mentoring opportunities that extended his influence in the most personal and enduring of ways. Community engagement became a subtle yet meaningful avenue for his leadership. Paul understood that his impact extended beyond immediate circles, that the environments in which people lived, worked, and interacted were shaped in part by thoughtful guidance and principled action. He participated in local initiatives, offered advice to community leaders, and provided insight into complex challenges, all in ways that reinforced cooperation, trust, and stability. His involvement was quiet and measured, yet its effects were tangible, fostering cohesion and resilience in the networks he touched. Observation, a skill honed over decades, remained Paul's most powerful tool. He could read subtle shifts in behavior, tone, and expression, allowing him to anticipate conflicts, identify opportunities, and guide outcomes with remarkable precision. This intuitive understanding of human behavior enabled him to operate several steps ahead, mitigating risk while promoting positive results. Unlike many, his influence was never about overt control. It was about shaping the conditions under which people could succeed naturally and responsibly. Patience, a principle cultivated early in his life, continued to define his approach. Paul had learned that the best decisions often emerged slowly, after careful reflection and consideration of multiple perspectives. He allowed events to unfold, intervening only when the timing was right and his insight could have maximum effect. This deliberate pacing reinforced his reputation as a thoughtful, reliable, and strategic presence, one whose judgment could be trusted even in complex or uncertain situations. Paul's legacy increasingly became a focus of his reflections. He understood that true influence is measured not by accolades or immediate results, but by the long-term impact of one's actions on others. His mentorship, guidance, and relationships had created ripples of influence that extended far beyond his direct involvement, shaping behaviors, decisions, and communities in subtle but enduring ways. He took pride in knowing that the values he lived by, integrity, loyalty, patience, and thoughtful guidance, would continue to inform the lives of those who had learned from him. As his life progressed, Paul also embraced the role of advisor and confidant to peers and community leaders. His experience, insight, and ability to navigate complex human and organizational dynamics made him an invaluable source of counsel. People trusted his perspective not only because of his strategic acumen, but also because of the ethical consistency and integrity with which he approached every situation. Paul's guidance was always grounded in principle, ensuring that influence was exercised responsibly and for the benefit of those involved. Reflection became a daily practice. Paul reviewed past decisions, assessed outcomes, and considered how his experiences could inform future action, not only for himself but for those he mentored. This ongoing process of self-examination allowed him to maintain clarity, adapt to new circumstances, and refine his understanding of human behavior and organizational dynamics. By continually analyzing the interplay between strategy, ethics, and human relationships, he ensured that his approach remained relevant and effective. Paul also recognized the importance of storytelling in preserving wisdom. He shared lessons from his life not as instructions but as narratives, illustrating principles of patience, strategy, and ethical leadership. These stories were imbued with subtle guidance, allowing listeners to internalize lessons in their own way. Through this approach, he extended his influence beyond immediate actions, ensuring that his insights could continue to shape behavior and thought for years to come. In these years, Paul's life exemplified the balance between strategic insight and human empathy. He had long understood that influence is most effective when it respects autonomy, fosters trust, and empowers others. His leadership was characterized by subtlety rather than overt control, by encouragement rather than coercion, and by enduring principles rather than opportunistic actions. These qualities ensured that his impact was both profound and lasting. By the conclusion of this phase, Paul DiCocco Sr. had achieved a level of influence and wisdom that few could match. He had cultivated relationships grounded in trust, guided others with subtle insight, and contributed to the cohesion and stability of his community and networks. His life demonstrated that true leadership is rooted in understanding, patience, and ethical engagement, and that the most enduring influence is exercised quietly, consistently, and with integrity. Paul's legacy at this stage was clear. He had created a network of guidance, mentorship, and principled influence that would continue long after his active involvement. His life was a testament to the power of subtle leadership, the value of trust and loyalty, and the enduring impact of decisions made with thoughtfulness, foresight, and integrity. Every person he had mentored, every relationship he had nurtured, and every lesson he had shared became part of a lasting legacy that defined the culmination of a life well lived. As Paul DiCocco Sr. approached the twilight years of his life, a profound sense of perspective and fulfillment settled over him. Decades of careful cultivation, of relationships, knowledge, and personal discipline had culminated in a life that carried quiet authority and enduring influence. He understood, better than most, that the true measure of a life was not found in fleeting recognition or outward displays of success, but in the depth of the connections one nurtures, the wisdom one imparts, and the positive impact one leaves on the people and communities around them. In these years, Paul's daily routines were less about ambition and more about reflection and refinement. He continued to engage with his network, offering counsel and perspective, but his interactions were now guided by a focus on sustaining legacy rather than pursuing immediate gains. Each conversation, meeting, or gathering was approached with a sense of purpose, considering not only the present moment but the long-term consequences for everyone involved. Paul's calm, deliberate presence became a source of stability and reassurance, reminding those around him of the enduring value of patience, observation, and ethical action. Mentorship remained a central pillar of Paul's life. Over decades, he had guided numerous individuals, instilling in them principles of thoughtful leadership, strategic insight, and ethical conduct. Now, his efforts were directed toward ensuring that the next generation would carry forward these values in both professional and personal spheres. His guidance was subtle yet powerful, emphasizing critical thinking, the importance of measured action, and the value of cultivating trust and respect. Through mentorship, Paul extended his influence far beyond what any individual could accomplish alone, creating a ripple effect that would endure long after his direct involvement ended. Family continued to be both an anchor and a source of joy. The relationships he had nurtured over a lifetime provided emotional sustenance, perspective, and a lens through which he could evaluate the true impact of his life's work. Shared meals, conversations, and simple moments of connection became opportunities for reflection and teaching, reinforcing the principles that had guided him since his youth. Loyalty, integrity, empathy, and responsibility. Family, for Paul, was not just a support system but a living demonstration of the values that had shaped his approach to life and leadership. Paul's strategic insight had reached its pinnacle. He could anticipate outcomes, interpret subtle cues, and guide complex interactions with remarkable precision. This expertise extended beyond personal relationships to encompass organizational dynamics, community structures, and broader social networks. Yet he wielded this skill with humility, understanding that true influence was most effective when exercised discreetly, empowering others rather than controlling them. His interventions were rarely visible, but their effects were lasting and profound, shaping outcomes in ways that often went unnoticed by those outside his immediate sphere. Observation remained Paul's most powerful tool. Decades of practice had sharpened his ability to perceive subtle shifts in behavior, detect underlying motivations, and anticipate challenges before they emerged. He applied this skill to guide decisions, manage relationships, and mentor others, always with the goal of fostering trust, cooperation, and positive outcomes. Unlike those who rely on authority or force, Paul's influence was rooted in understanding and strategic foresight, allowing him to navigate complex social landscapes with both precision and grace. Patience continued to define Paul's approach to life. He understood that the most significant opportunities and solutions often unfolded slowly, requiring careful attention and timing. He refrained from hasty action, choosing instead to wait for the optimal moment to intervene, ensuring that his guidance would have the greatest impact. This restraint, cultivated over decades, reinforced his credibility and enhanced the confidence that others placed in his judgment. People came to rely on him not because of position or power, but because of the reliability, wisdom, and foresight he consistently demonstrated. Community engagement was an increasingly important aspect of Paul's later years. He recognized that his influence extended beyond personal networks to the broader environment in which he lived and worked. Through thoughtful participation, counsel, and support, he contributed to the stability and cohesion of his community. His presence and advice helped shape constructive outcomes, foster cooperation, and resolve conflicts, always with an emphasis on ethical action and long-term benefit. Paul's role as a stabilizing figure reflected his deep understanding of how influence, when exercised responsibly, could improve the lives of many. Reflection became a daily practice, allowing Paul to consolidate his experiences, distill lessons, and consider the legacy he would leave. He reviewed past decisions, analyzed outcomes, and sought ways to strengthen the impact of his guidance. These reflections were not merely nostalgic. They were forward-looking, aimed at ensuring that his principles and wisdom would endure. Paul's commitment to self-examination reinforced the clarity, judgment, and ethical consistency that had defined his influence throughout his life. In these later years, Paul also embraced the role of storyteller and teacher. He shared his experiences, insights, and lessons with those willing to listen, framing them as narratives that illustrated the importance of strategic thinking, patience, and principled action. These stories were not lectures but invitations to reflection, allowing listeners to internalize the wisdom in ways that were meaningful to them. Through storytelling, Paul ensured that his influence would persist, carried forward in the minds and actions of those who absorbed his guidance. Paul's philosophy of leadership, rooted in empathy, observation, subtle guidance, and ethical engagement, was fully realized in this phase of life. He had learned that the most powerful influence is quiet, consistent, and principled. It is exercised not through coercion, intimidation, or spectacle, but through understanding, trust, and careful stewardship. By modeling these principles in his actions and relationships, Paul had cultivated an enduring legacy that would shape behavior, decisions, and relationships for years to come. As he reflected on his life, Paul recognized that the true measure of success lay not in accolades, wealth, or recognition, but in the enduring impact of his actions and the positive influence he had on others. The relationships he had nurtured, the mentorship he had provided, and the ethical principles he had upheld were the most lasting aspects of his life. These achievements, subtle yet profound, ensured that his presence would continue to be felt long after he stepped back from active involvement. By the conclusion of this phase, Paul DiCocco Sr. had become a figure of lasting wisdom and influence, whose life exemplified the power of thoughtful leadership, strategic insight, and principled action. His legacy was defined not by spectacle but by the enduring trust, respect, and guidance he provided, creating ripples of impact that would resonate across generations. Paul's story in these later years was one of quiet authority, lasting mentorship, and a life lived in alignment with the principles that had guided him from youth to maturity. In the final chapter of his life, Paul DiCocco Sr. embraced reflection, gratitude, and the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived. Decades of careful guidance, mentorship, and principled leadership had left an enduring mark on his family, friends, and community. Every relationship he had nurtured, every lesson he had shared, and every subtle influence he had exercised contributed to a legacy that extended far beyond his own presence. Paul's life was a testament to the power of patience, insight, and ethical action. He showed that true influence is not loud or forceful, but consistent, thoughtful, and grounded in respect for others. Those who had learned from him carried forward his values, ensuring that the principles he embodied, integrity, loyalty, empathy, and strategic wisdom, would continue to guide future generations. As he looked back on his journey, Paul knew that his impact would endure not through recognition or fame, but through the lasting positive effects of his life on the people and communities he touched. His story was one of subtle power, quiet guidance, and a legacy built on trust, respect, and the careful cultivation of relationships. And in that quiet, enduring influence, Paul DiCocco Sr. achieved a life of true meaning and lasting significance.